Hello and welcome to this episode of Star Wars Universe Podcast. Today we are continuing our coverage of Rebels Season 3, Episodes 19 and 20, and we're going to be talking about one of the most beloved, impactful, often on everyone's, top 5 favorite episodes list, Twin Suns, and we'll be talking about some droids. All that and more with Paul Hoppe, Sarah Hayashi, and myself right after this commercial break. We have no control over. Welcome back. My name is Matthew, your host. I use they, them pronouns. I'm joined as I am for most Rebels episodes by Sarah Hayashi. Sarah,
hi.
Introduce yourself.
Sarah Hayashi, she, her pronouns.
Awesome. And as our special returning guest, Paul Hoppe is joining us. I know this was an episode Paul was very excited to talk about. So, Paul, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Paul Hoppe, a.k.a. Zen Madman, and I watched at least half the episodes we're going to be talking about today. I like that you said the episode just now. Which underscores, I think, the source of our issue here.
Well, so that's the thing. We're covering 2 episodes today, but I think it's fair to say that it's sort of like we have, kind of like a warm-up and the main attraction. We're talking about 2 episodes, 19 and 20. 19 is Double Agent Droid, a perfectly respectable episode. But 20, Twin Suns, is one that is, as I said, it's one of the first episodes that comes to many people's minds when they think about Star Wars Rebels. It is very well known, very often memed, and one that I know, Paul, you had a lot of thoughts on, and so we're really excited to talk about. And we will get into that, but first we are going to talk about some droids. And so, Paul, you can be the voice of the person who hasn't seen these episodes. Sarah, do you want to read the summary for Season 3, Episode 19, Double Agent Droid?
Gladly. Chopper, AP-5, and Wedge are sent to an Imperial facility to steal access codes for the factory on Lothal. AP-5 manages to successfully locate and steal the codes. Meanwhile, Chopper accesses the Imperial network and draws the attention of the Controller, an Imperial agent who controls an advanced spy ship. The Controller remotely seizes control of Chopper, intending to use him to locate the Rebel base. Back with the Ghost crew, AP-5 begins to suspect something is wrong when Chopper acts uncharacteristically nice. The rest of the crew thinks AP-5 is just squabbling with Chopper again, though Hera begins to have her suspicions as well. The Controller then uses Chopper to lock the crew in the cargo hold while he attempts to attack the Ghost's computer. AP-5 manages to override the door's controls, allowing the crew to escape and disable Chopper. Angry that the Imperials have harmed her droid, Hera sends a counter-signal back to the Controller, overloading his ship's systems and causing it to explode. Chopper returns to normal and begins once again bickering with AP-5.
So what did you think of this episode?
I really liked it. Like, it's, as you say, it's a very good, respectable episode. In the sort of order we're doing things today, it's like a delicious, fantastic appetizer that after you have the main course, you're going to completely forget about. But like,
yeah. I think that's a good way to put it.
Like while you're having it, it's great. It's cute. I love the like Wedge AP-5 Chopper love triangle that we've got going on. I love the Annie Get Your Gun reference. It's like Josh Gad is in this episode. Like there's so many high notes. It's a really fun episode.
I think it's a really good way to put it. I think episodes like this are a big part of why I love Rebels so much, because we don't have to go back into it, but we've discussed before that like some of the highest high notes of Clone Wars may be things that that Rebels doesn't get to as often, or some people might think never gets to. But the lowest notes of the filler is kind of a judgmental term. I more mean the episodes that are there to give you a fun episode, show you kind of a day in the life for our characters without necessarily focusing on advancing the plot very much. I think kind of this is an example of that, and it's enjoyable. It's a lot of fun. It doesn't teach me all sorts of new things about the Star Wars universe. It doesn't, move me to tears or to any strong emotion except humor, but that's enough for 22 minutes of my day. And I do really love getting to see more of the interactions of droids because, and Paul, this is something you've brought up a bunch on some of our other podcasts, when R2 is talking to C-3PO, C-3PO is often presented as we're laughing at him, not with him. He's kind of so pathetic, he's so ridiculous that, like, we like him as a character, but he's very much kind of the butt of people's jokes, and we don't really think much about his actual suffering. especially in the last movie where he's almost killed, basically, in some ways or another, and it's not really taken seriously. Here, I feel like AP5 is also ridiculous and is also kind of pompous, but I sympathize with him a lot more than I think I ever would C-3PO, and I think that's because, they're telling the story from both his and Chopper's perspective, and I really appreciate that.
And also, C-3PO was made to suffer. It's his lot in life.
That's also
true. That is true. It is the writers who made that his lot in life.
Yeah.
And here, so to be clear, I have seen this episode. It was some time ago. I did not rewatch the episode just for this podcast. So, so I have seen it. I did enjoy it. I do agree that this is, when we talk about like high notes and low notes, I think usually it's meant in a like high notes are good, low notes are bad. Which is, I don't know, as somebody who's played the bass at times in my life, feels rather dismissive of the low end. But, if you look at the metaphor in a different way, it's like, yeah, you do need like a base of sort of you need different notes, right? In order to have any of the notes stand out. And so I do think that this episode kind of like lays a foundation of like, here's just kind of some normal, more low-key stuff, so that then when you have your big, epic, sweeping moments, those stand kind of above something else, right? As opposed to just being these isolated things. And I think this episode does a good job of that. But, most importantly, like for an episode like that, it does give us a lot of like character moments, right? And the fact that the reason AP5 suspects something up is because Chopper's personality is off, is to me that's like the opposite of the way you might write a droid episode, if you weren't really making the droids people and you didn't want us to relate to them. And so I think, almost at the end of season 3 now, we've seen enough of Chopper that we're like, oh yeah, that makes sense that someone would be like, why isn't he being a dick? Like, what the heck? Like, why isn't Chopper a tool right now? So, I think this episode does that really well in a way that, I really enjoy C-3PO and R2-D2, but I do think that C-3PO is very much the butt of the joke all the time. The joke is like at him most of the time, right? And here it feels a little bit more with AP5 and Chopper.
Totally. Yeah, like I think if this were a 3PO R2 dynamic, like C-3PO would just be happy that R2 was being nice and cooperative, right? And I don't think he would clock like you're not being an ass to me, right? Whereas AP5 instantly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very true. I like the spin you put on the high note, low note thing. And what I more meant by it is, I was thinking kind of that sort of like the best and the worst. And just kind of further elucidate there, because part of my point was, like, I don't think this is a bad episode, but to me, it's not one of the ones you remember. Like you said, it's part of that baseline foundation. In Clone Wars, I mean, specifically, especially with, I think some of those like baseline episodes are pretty weak.
Right.
In ways that I don't think we get too many of that in Rebels. But I like your perspective as well. That's that idea of like, you need the day in the life. You need the just, this is what a normal episode's like, so that a Twin Sons or a Twilight of the Apprentice or one of the other like major ones like that hits that much harder.
Not just that, but like it gives you a little bit of a reprieve from it as well, right?
Yeah.
Because this is a lighthearted entertainment show at the end of it, right? And like... I think, so I've just started watching The Orville, and I've also almost finished watching The Orville at the same time, because it's, once you get past, like, midway through season 2, it becomes a very good show. And I think, like, once they figure their deal out, they, like, walk that line really well of, like, comedic moments throughout to give you a bit of a reprieve, but there's like heavy sci-fi topics, and almost like towards the end of season 3 I was kind of longing for like, just give me a jokes episode, right? Because like we're dealing with such heavy stuff, and I feel like even with Rebels, right, like the jokes episode, the filler episode, the quality of it is so good, right? Like yes, this is not a plot advancing episode. I mean, they steal access codes, but that's like the only real plot moment that actually happens. But the rest of it, like, it's just, it's a really good episode. I will defend it to my death, I guess. Yeah.
And I think it's really, especially now, it's nice to remember that this is a way you can do shows. Because I think most of the shows we're getting now, especially in the more kind of geeky world, is things where, it's like a 6 to 12 episode. Every episode is going to have a strong emotional punch. Every episode is going to wrench you one way or then wrench you the other. And, it's going to be great, but you're not going to get that reprieve, Like 6 episodes of Ms. Marvel, we're not going to have I think we did have a filler episode that we shouldn't have, but that's a whole other story.
Oh, man.
But yeah,
I don't know what you're talking about. Okay.
We'll talk about that at some point.
Sure.
Yeah. We actually did a podcast about it did we? Yes, we did. We did on superhero ethics. But yeah, so definitely there's a lot to talk about there. Any other things about this episode that people particularly liked or didn't like or just kind of wanted to comment on?
I love AP5's little song at the very end. Like, it is
so good.
And it's, like, so out of left field. Like, why is he floating through space with, like, are those baby Purrgil? Like, what? There's, like, little space glowy things flying around him, and he's just, like, singing this little song about how he's alone, and he's happy, and it's quiet, and he loves it. And then the ghost comes and picks him up, and they're like, "Oh, we rescued you, buddy! Hooray!" And he's like, "Yes, hooray! I have been rescued." Right? It's like AP5 is such a misanthrope, and I love him so much for it.
It gave me strong, like, Marvin the paranoid android from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy
100%,
feels.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. It was real good there.
Yeah.
I found it a relatable moment.
Yeah.
Oh right,
Definitely.
Everyone else again. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. I guess my biggest, like, quibble with this episode is the, like, sending power back through Chopper makes the controller's ship explode.
Like, the whole ship, right?
The whole, like, the controller and the ship, right? And, like, we never get... So Controller's a strange character because he's got the, like, headphones on, and everybody in that ship seems, like, a little robotic. So I think you're, like, are they androids? They look like one of the dudes who works for Lando.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lobot.
Okay.
It's the same kind of setup that Lobot does, and I think Lobot is described as, like, kind of an android, in that he's, like, part, or, like, more a cyborg. He's, like, part person, part machine.
Okay.
And yeah, I think he's that same kind of thing.
I thought...
I didn't really get... I was kind of like, this whole thing is fascinating, and I want to learn more of him, and I wish he had been more of kind of like a 3-episode arc kind of a guy.
Yeah.
Guess
or, like,
they all blew up.
Yeah, right? Like, give me an opportunity to, like, maybe talk about him later, but no, he's been exploded.
I mean, you didn't get the power surge. I'm still on, is it really this easy to control someone else's droid? And if so, why aren't we doing this all the time to every, like...
Yeah, so I think the fact that, like, it was a Chopper was, like, plugged into their system specifically, and they managed to, like, get in while he was, like, connected, right? Like, the whole, like, we can pilot him remotely, therefore they must have a powerful system close by, therefore I can explode it from a distance, kind of...
Right.
Didn't make a ton of sense.
It didn't make sense, but I was willing to forgive it because I loved the Hera. To me, what it said more than anything is Hera is going to turn into a mama bear when one of her family is in danger, and Chopper is just as much her family as anybody else.
Oh yeah, don't talk to me
like
or my son ever again. Yeah,
yeah, it was awesome.
No, it was great, and like I loved that. I loved protective mom Hera angry energy, but like when she's feeding the power overload back, like Chopper is squealing in pain, and she's just more focused on like talking to the Imperials through Chopper. I wish she kind of would have had more of a reaction to that, right? Because like it's still Chopper's body that is presumably experiencing pain, if he can experience pain.
Yeah.
But then afterwards she's like immediately very loving and like, Chopper, come back to me, are you still in there, etc., etc. So she gets a pass.
Is the thing on the controller's head, is that like Ezra's parents' friends?
Yes,
right?
I think the Rhodian who had that in season 1.
Right,
I think it's the same kind of thing.
Downloaded all the information and stuff.
Yeah.
So
I never put that together.
It seems like it's a human who can get this kind of like implant, or not a human necessarily, but you know, a biological organism that can get this like cybernetic implant.
Right. Yeah, I think it's very true.
Yeah, I so wish we got more of the controller and his whole deal, because he's got this like crew of cyborg people. It's Josh Gad who like plays it great. Yeah.
Why do I know that name?
He's
What
Olaf
else?
the Snowman in Frozen,
Oh.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
among other things, but that's probably
Right.
Yeah.
Well-known voice actor. All right. Well, we've enjoyed a good appetizer. The plates are taken away. It is now time for the main course. Paul, do you want to do the honors of reading the episode summary for episode 20, Twin Sons?
For our Satan Piccata, yes.
Yes.
Okay, Twin Sons. After receiving a holocron message, Ezra Bridger tells the Ghost crew that they must go to Tatooine to save Obi-Wan Kenobi from Maul. The crew refuses, as they believe that Kenobi is dead from Order 66, and the message is a trap set by Maul. Ezra and Chopper sneak away and head to Tatooine, but things go wrong as their ship is destroyed by Tusken Raiders. Guided by the holocron, Ezra and Chopper set off across the desert in search of Kenobi. After several hours of aimless wandering, Chopper runs out of power and shuts down. Ezra is then haunted by visions of Maul, telling him he failed his loved ones. Shortly afterward, Ezra passes out. Upon awakening, he finds that Kenobi has rescued him and Chopper. Ezra tries to warn Kenobi that Maul is after him and asks him to help the rebellion. However, Kenobi refuses, saying that the rebellion already has what it needs to fight the Empire. He also has no intention of fighting Maul, though he knows it is now inevitable. As Maul finds the pair, Kenobi sends Ezra and Chopper to safety and faces off with Maul in a lightsaber duel. After a period of prolonged tension, Maul strikes first but is quickly countered and defeated by Kenobi. Before Maul dies, Kenobi stays by his side and reveals to him that he is watching over whom he believes is the Chosen One, with Maul's last words being, "He will avenge us." Ezra and Chopper return to base on Maul's ship. Ezra tells the rebels that Maul is gone and apologizes for sneaking away. The episode ends with Kenobi watching a young Luke Skywalker as the Lars moisture farm from a distance.
So, Paul, what made this one of the episodes you wanted to make sure you got to come back for?
I mean, it's mostly the lightsaber duel, which is just, I mean, calling it a duel is like, it's like a Western duel, you know? And I mean, my understanding is that a good number of sword duels were like this, where it wasn't a very complicated exchange of, feints and parries. It's like, bang, bang, boom, someone's dead. Or someone's mortally wounded, like, rather quickly. And this definitely is not a long lightsaber duel, but there's a lot of build up to it. And it's just really well done. And, it completes Maul's arc in terms of, like, his sort of, like, emotional journey, which is, like, from point A to point A, or point V to point V, like, vengeance to vengeance, anger to anger. Like, at the end, like, he's still, like, thinking about vengeance, after everything. And then Kenobi's kind of reacting to that. Like, it's sad. Like, he sees that Maul was this, this servant of the Emperor who then got cast off after, being bisected by Kenobi, and then kind of, like, was free, I mean, he had, like, in theory, right? Like, he could have done kind of whatever he wanted at that point, but he decided to keep his life devoted to the Emperor in a way by, like, seeking revenge for the rest of his life, you know? So he didn't really break free, even though he could be free. And it's very sad, but, like, it's sad in a way that doesn't feel, like, really emotionally manipulative to me. It feels earned. It feels like, yeah, that seems like what would happen, And, there's some other stuff, but that's kind of the main gist of it for me.
Yeah. And, like, Sam Witwer just does, like, he makes a meal of this, and it's fantastic, right? His voice acting is amazing. I don't know how many times I've watched the opening scene of this episode, just because, like, Riki likes to play it on YouTube every once in a while, and I'm like, all right, yeah, sure. Let's watch it. Let's scream Kenobi together. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really powerful. And I want to get into the lightsaber duel itself, definitely, because there's a lot of great stuff about how that was animated. That's just wonderful. But just the whole thing surrounding it. One thing I noted is that earlier in the episode, Ezra is talking to Kenobi about, like, which one of them should challenge Maul, because Ezra feels bad for basically leading Maul to Kenobi, and Kenobi is saying, no, I need to do this. And he says, I will heal this wound. And like one of the things I find very striking about it is that there's real care. Like the write-up says stays by his side. That's kind of underselling it. Kenobi like takes the dying body of Maul into his arms and like holds him as he dies. And I will say it's a scene that launched 1,000 fanfics. But I don't think you have to take that interpretation of it. But although that's certainly a valid one, but it's definitely, to me, it's that kind of like, two ancient enemies who've been chasing each other through, however many decades. There's a bond there. And there's definitely as you said, kind of Kenobi started Maul on this journey. And in some way, to me, I feel like Kenobi has some awareness that maybe the best thing he can do for Maul is to kill him, because it is healing. It's finishing what he started to do on Naboo. And as well, and I should have backed up, because I think, to me, an essential part of this is, I think that somewhere in Maul's head, a part of him wants to kill Kenobi, and a part of him will also be just as happy if Kenobi kills him. Mm-hmm. Like the kind of like suicide by Jedi kind of thing happening here. And I think Kenobi knows that. And I to me, not just from that one line, but just the whole way it's set up, there's just so much like Kenobi recognizing that this is the only way Maul's story can end. And so he kills him, but it's kind of giving a service to, it's kind of doing a nice thing to him of like, I'm gonna end your suffering. I'm gonna let this end, and also keep myself alive because I gotta watch over this kid. But
also not get killed by former Sith, but like
right.
Former, they still call him Darth Maul, but yeah.
But he doesn't call himself Darth Maul, right?
True.
He calls himself Maul now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he would be very clear that he's no longer Sith, but some others might see him that way for sure.
Fair. From a certain point of view.
From a certain point of view.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I also think, like, I think you said, like, what is it? Kenobi started all of this for Maul. Maul also started all of this for Kenobi, right?
True.
Like, there's this reciprocal relationship where they kind of, like, interfered in each other's lives and made things go off the rails in both directions for both of them. And then they've just been dancing around each other ever since. I didn't get any sort of, like, romantic feels from...
Oh, no, I'm not saying... I'm saying I think... Yeah,
I understand why I understand why all the fanfics are there. But, like, I didn't get any sort of, like, romantic feels, but I definitely saw the love there, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and it's so weird, too, because, like, that lightsaber duel, I mean, harkens back to Qui-Gon, who Obi-Wan obviously loved and respected as a mentor, right? So, like, he's clearly just brought up memories of the person this person has just murdered, or not just murdered, had murdered a long time ago. But then to still, like, love Maul after that, I think is, like Obi-Wan talked about, like, healing this wound, and I think it is a sign of Obi-Wan, like, finally being able to put some stuff to bed, right? And, like, it's been a long journey for Obi-Wan, and then, like, he's still on it, right? He'll still be on it until, like, Vader kills him, right? And even after that, and, like, Force Ghost form. Yeah. But, it's nice to see some wounds closing up, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, especially because you're right, like, him killing Qui-Gon, there's been some great writing about this recently, that, like, had Qui-Gon lived, Anakin might well not have turned to the dark side.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole thing there. But also, like, Maul killed Satine. Like, that's also a huge wound for like, and it's funny because the whole thing's about Maul wanting revenge. I don't think Kenobi wants revenge, but I still think you're right. I mean, Maul has had many major effects on his life, not just killing Qui-Gon.
Yeah. Gosh.
Yeah, I feel the connection between them, right? But then also the disconnection where their lives have intersected in these very important ways that are emotional for both of them, right? As much as, like, a Jedi tries to not be emotional, it's like, he killed pretty much, like, 2 of the 3 most important people, or 4, in Obi-Wan's life, right? Mm-hmm. And so, that's kind of a big deal. And, they faced off a bunch over the years between, after Maul came back as Maul, right? After he was no longer really sporting the Darth. But then the disconnection is also, like, they are coming from such different places in terms of how they view the world, what they want to do in the world, and like they're communicating, but they're also never really, it's like they're, metaphorically, they're not really speaking the same language. It's like Kenobi, at some point, it's like Kenobi just isn't going to get through to Maul. Like, I'm not sure how much actual trying there was along the way, like whether that was ever a thing. Like, it's interesting how little Jedi trying to bring people back from the dark side there is. And I guess maybe the idea is that wasn't a thing that people really thought about doing until Luke's like, no, I'm going to do this. Like, he's my pops, But
there's a book that actually goes into quite a lot about Kenobi. Like, I think there's a couple Clone War episodes where Kenobi says something to Ventress after she's left Dooku about, like, maybe you could come back. And because she did start as a Padawan.
Right, yeah.
And Sarah is shaking her fist because we actually did a whole episode on the book Dark Disciple, which is very much about Kenobi and Ventress and Voss and the Kenobi believing that Ventress can come back from the dark side. Unfortunately, GarageBand really didn't want us to give that episode to you, and so it was eaten, but we'll hopefully be back at some point. But so just all that is to add on to what you're saying, Paul, and now that you get back to it.
That there is a lot of that in the literature, right? But maybe not so much in the... that's something where I feel like something like Clone Wars could have kind of stepped up another level,
Paul,
no.
this lost Dark Disciple episode. Dark Disciple was supposed to be Clone War episodes.
Yeah.
So yes, like you're correct.
Yep.
You're so
Awesome.
very right.
Awesome. I was gonna like make a twist the knife kind of joke about it, but Matthew's already covered it. So gonna be like, somebody should record a podcast about that thing.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I feel so great.
Yeah,
It's awesome.
Yeah, fantastic.
It was so good too. It's such a good episode.
Now I feel like I'm the only one here who actually missed out on that conversation. So now I feel it's my loss too.
Well, maybe next time we'll have you on, because I often like when we're discussing a book that probably most of our listeners haven't read, having someone on the podcast who hasn't read it either and kind of keep us honest. So maybe the three of us can connect at some point about it.
Yeah, that'd be fun. I just wanted to push back on the one, like, maybe killing him is the best thing he can do for him, and like maybe that's kind of what like Maul maybe wants. I feel like Maul is going into that fight like the way he goes into every fight, like someone's gonna die, and then somehow a lot of people don't die in a lot of fights with him, but that's just because they want to keep writing the characters. But like, I do think he's at peace with the, like, one of us is gonna die right now, and that's gonna be the end of it. And you can look at it in a perspective of, like, he's kind of like putting him out of his suffering or something, but I'm not sure I would really share that perspective, but I think it's a valid one.
That's fair.
I think it's less about putting him out of his... I mean, I guess it is kind of a putting it out of his suffering, but just like ending
ending
this,
it. Right.
Like, it just needs to end. It's gone on too long.
Yeah.
And it's caused both of them too much pain.
Yeah, the ellipse is now complete, and not everything's a circle.
Because like you said, Sarah, Maul has tried, like... And it's right here the books help as well, because the books kind of really explain that, like, Darth Sidious, Palpatine, has raised Maul since he was a baby, and like he was given to him on Dathomir, and so all Maul knew for all of his life was dedication to Darth Sidious. Then that was thrown out, so now it became me and my brother are going to get back in with the Emperor, and then that didn't work, and then it was
and Sidious killed his brother.
Yeah, Sidious kills, and then it's going to become, I'm going to be this criminal mastermind and take over Black Sun, and then take over Mandalore, and that didn't work out.
Right.
And now he's just the only focus he can have left is Obi-Wan.
Right.
And a little bit this idea of, like, the Chosen One, which I'm curious. You're at the end there. I definitely think that Obi-Wan is now talking about Luke, in part because I think for Obi-Wan, if he believes that Luke was the actual chosen one, not Anakin, it makes everything that happened a little bit easier for him. But when Maul saw those visions of, I guess he probably does mean Luke, because it's because it's because of Luke, but it is Anakin Vader who does eventually kill the Emperor. So Which one do you think Maul is referring to? Is he referring to Luke or is he referring to Anakin Vader? Because he definitely had a moment way earlier of he still lives that wasn't about Obi-Wan, which he had a moment of like, oh, Anakin Vader is still alive. Which do you think he means at the very end of he will avenge us?
I think it's Luke. Just because it's clearly Obi-Wan is clearly talking about Luke. So maybe that's just like coloring my opinion there. But he will avenge us. Like, I'm curious about what he means by us, or like who he's referring to. I think in that sentence. Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
I think he means himself, his brother, Obi-Wan. Like the Jedi, like basically everybody who's been wronged by him, and which he feels very heavily on his own behalf, and then Obi-Wan's as well, hey, this guy did both of us dirty, and I do think he's talking about Luke, and I think, I think the Chosen One is sort of like it's a prophecy, and then something happens, but it's like, it's just a prophecy, it doesn't mean it's true,
Yeah, that's fair. That's definitely fair.
So.
I think that makes sense, and I definitely think that, when he says us, he's referring to everyone, but also very much him and Obi-Wan specifically, because at this point, he was telling Ezra about this a couple episodes ago, or maybe last season, he kind of has come to understand that, like, when he and Obi-Wan were fighting, they were basically both pawns being controlled by Sidious, and so I think it's part of that. It's like maybe they never really had to fight, but it was all about this.
Right.
This thing.
Yeah, I thought us was exclusively him and Obi-Wan. I wasn't even thinking about, like, Savage and everybody else.
Right.
But.
I think it definitely primarily was about the two of them, for sure.
Sure. But yeah, I think it's like, I think you could have the reading of like, he will avenge us as in like the non-Sith dark side users, right? But I do think Obi-Wan is included in that. And that's, I'm glad you both think that as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So let's talk about the lightsaber fight itself. And I've seen some great analysis of it that I can just kind of ramble on about. But first, do either of you have kind of thoughts on like what makes this particular fight, or as you said, Paul, like a kind of just like basically it's an attack, a parry, and a counterattack, and then we're done. What made the fight itself so powerful?
So I'm going to kind of like cabbage head this one a little bit, because I am not super familiar with the prequels, as I have said many, many times through the course of the series. So I didn't get all of the nuance that the battle is referencing, right? And so I was just like, well, that was quick. That was over fast. But I still I liked it. And then I had all of the meaning explained to me, and I was like, oh, wow. Okay. Now I see why everyone loves this battle so much. So, Paul, if you would like to explain all that meaning.
Yeah, I mean, as you, I have not watched the prequels a whole bunch. I do think that the lightsaber battles are the best parts. So those videos are available on YouTube without all of the everything else, if that's what you're into. I think the thing about a duel is that there can be a lot of sort of thinking and a lot of sort of what feels like downtime ahead of when somebody attacks, right? And, as a martial artist, I'll say like that's very real, in terms of at least, my fighting experience is primarily not like, real world getting into fights and stuff, which I think this applies less to, although it certainly could to some scenarios. But in terms of like, being in a ring or being like, I'm facing my opponent, we both know that somebody's going to attack someone, and then somebody's going to try and defend themselves and maybe counterattack, and the counterattack might be you hit them before they hit you. But there is this very real phenomenon of when one person, goes in for an attack, you can't attack without opening yourself up to a counterattack, right? And so this really plays with that in the timing and the stances, and I feel like I can feel them thinking like, Obi-Wan's like, I'll take my normal stance. Then he's like, wait, no, I'll do it this way. And because I think I know if I come at him this way, or if I stand this way, he's going to do this one thing and expect me to do this other thing, but I'm actually going to do a totally different thing that's going to be an effective counter, right? And so the way they set that up with the majority of the action of the duel actually happening before the action, right? It's in the mind, and you can see it. It's like a conversation, without words, with like how you're standing, and like, is it sideways? Is more, head on. That's the sort of thing that I would have loved if, they could have done it in the prequel trilogy. They certainly could have done it in Clone Wars. They could have done it a little bit in the, training Sabine in the Darksaber, where if they actually like verbalized a little bit more of what these actual lightsaber techniques are. Because I know people talk about, Form 1, Form 2, Form 5. And I'm like, I don't know what those are. I haven't seen people actually talk about that in any of the media.
Yeah.
I can look at the way someone's fighting and be like, oh, yes, that's clearly one style, and this other thing's clearly a different style. And somebody seems to have just had a stylistic shift somewhere in the middle of a fight. But I don't know what the names of those forms are, because they haven't been named in the moving fiction that I've seen anyway, and I believe they're referred to more in the books or something, and like somehow people know which is which. I don't, and I feel like that would add a lot, but at the same time, like, the scene still plays even if you don't know that, right? Which I think is always nice.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, and I think...
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Matthew.
Good.
Okay, I was going to say, like, I think one of the important things, like you mentioned, Obi-Wan starts in his normal, like, 2 fingers pointing lightsaber over the head pose. Yeah. I'm doing it on camera.
Which seems very impractical, but okay,
Yeah, but it's cool as heck.
Yeah, it is.
And then, like, the pose he switches to, he, like, consciously switches to is Qui-Gon's, like, opening pose.
Yeah.
Right? And then, like, so the thing that Obi-Wan thinks this will signal in Maul, he does. And then, like, Maul comes at Obi-Wan the way that he came at Qui-Gon and ultimately killed Qui-Gon. And, Obi-Wan had a counter to that instead of following.
Yeah,
he'd had like 20 years to think about it, so... Or 30.
Right.
Yeah, and it goes by so fast that it's easy to miss. But the action plays out exactly the way the Qui-Gon Maul fight happened. Qui-Gon moved to do kind of like an overhead attack. Maul blocked it in a way that kind of just pushed the Qui-Gon's lightsaber out of the way so that he couldn't parry when Maul just went to attack. And Obi-Wan basically like bluffs and like induces Maul to do that exact same thing, but now that he knows it's coming, he just slashes downward through the middle of the lightsaber and into Maul. In a way that like I feel like should have cut his face in half or something.
Right.
I don't quite understand how that happened, but, we don't want to completely gross out the people watching, so I'm fine with how it happened.
The moment afterwards when he's, like, holding the dying Maul would have played a little differently if his face had been cut in half.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Like,
instead of just closing his eyes, he's, like, pushing his face back together. Yeah.
Exactly.
A little bit of dramatic playing with it, I'm fine with. But, yeah, it was so good to see, and one of the content that I saw that was analyzing this was actually during the TV show Kenobi, because he kind of goes through 3 he like first goes into like his one stance and then he goes into kind of a second for a minute and then goes into that third which is the Qui-Gon stance, but is also the stance that he uses against Vader in A New Hope, but that they actually like I guess from what I understand, it seems pretty clear that the people making Kenobi paid attention to that, because the kind of middle stance he does is the stance he uses in Kenobi, at least at certain points.
Oh, okay. I was trying to remember what that third one was, because I didn't recognize it as well. Like I was like, okay, that's the Obi-Wan stance, that's the Qui-Gon stance. What's the third one? But the third one was like his in between phase, right?
Transitional, sort of stance. Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of good analysis about why he kind of advances from one to the next to the next, and like that last phase is kind of a two-handed instead of one-handed. Which kind of explains why, like, in Phantom Menace, it looks like they're fighting with rapiers, and in A New Hope, it looks like they're fighting with claymores.
Right.
I mean, like, it's just totally different kind of sword fighting.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's that kind of thing. Like, all of this happens in, maybe 7 seconds? 8 seconds?
Yeah.
Like, it's just amazing how much thought went into what really is like the first time I watched that episode, I didn't catch any of this. It's very much a blink and you miss it kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But that's like... Go ahead, Paul.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think the actual, like, swinging of swords is, like, 2 or 3 seconds, right? If that. But the
Yeah.
I feel like the lead up to it is a little bit longer, but maybe it's not. Maybe that's still
Like I think
I
the
think
actual. I think the actual swinging of swords is like maybe a second.
Yeah.
Like if that. But yeah, the lead up is like a few seconds, but it's not.
It's still very short.
Yeah, I think it feels really profound and really like prolonged, but I don't think it's actually all that long.
They kind of circle the fire for a few seconds talking to each other, and then they go into their stances, and then the fight begins.
Yeah, because they're talking, and it's like Obi-Wan hasn't drawn yet, right? And then Maul kicks out the fire, and I think says something about Luke, maybe. And then Obi-Wan's like, all right, let's go, you know. And
yeah, well, he says, like, why you're not, it's like, you're a desert rat. You've, like, I'm going to leave you in your squalor. This is a fate worse than death.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, you're here protecting something. Oh, you're protecting someone. Yeah. And then they...
Right.
But, like, another moment, like, before this battle that I really love is, like, Maul shows up with, like, perfect timing to be able to say, like, it's me who you're talking about in this current sentence, Ezra and Obi-Wan. And then, like, for quite a long time, Obi-Wan has his back to Maul while he's, like, helping Ezra get on the dewback and giving him, like, directions for how to get home.
Yeah.
Right? And, like, it never seems like there's a question in Obi-Wan's mind that, like, Maul's gonna stab me in the back, right? It's like Maul's gonna stand there and patiently wait, and we're gonna actually have a proper duel.
Right.
And he just, like, knows this the whole time. Yeah.
Like, he knows that's what Maul came for, right?
Yeah.
He didn't come to stab him in the back.
Maul says he came there to kill him, but no, he came there to defeat him.
Right. Yeah,
Sure,
exactly.
yeah.
Especially because we've never really heard Maul talk about this, so I think it's referenced in some of the literature. I haven't gotten to those books yet. Like, in Maul's mind, and I think he's justified in thinking this, he won the lightsaber duel in Phantom Menace.
Oh, right.
Like, he disarmed Obi-Wan, he knocked him into this pit, then he got stupid and arrogant and tried to, like, you know, kind of taunt his victim instead of just, like, delivering the coup de grace. And Kenobi was able to kind of, like, take advantage of that and, like, flip up and deliver a killing blow or a not killing blow.
Killing blow.
A
A
maiming.
bisecting
But yeah,
blow.
but I think if someone asked Maul, like, who won the actual lightsaber duel, he'd be like, I did. And so, yeah, I think it's even more important. He doesn't want to kill, like, stabbing in the back doesn't matter.
Right.
He needs to once again show, I did actually outfight Kenobi.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think this episode is really great. This duel in particular is a great example of how a prequel can totally work. You know, because first of all, like, that however many seconds it is, let's say 7 seconds, it feels so much longer, right? And because you can play with time and, like, kind of, like, almost dilate time, certainly, you know, dilate the perception of time by building tension. And you know, what are the stakes here? Like, we know Obi-Wan's gonna win, right? We know he's in A New Hope. We know Maul's not. So, like, it feels to me like we don't need these stakes of, like, oh, what's gonna happen? It's like, by telling the story in such a way that, like, we care as much how it happens as, like, you know, answering the question, what happens? It's like, we know, but that doesn't have to, like, get rid of all the tension or make something not feel like it matters. It still feels like it matters to me just as much as if I didn't know what was going to happen next. You know, it just, to me, it's just masterful, like, prequel telling, you know, which is difficult, right? I mean, I'm not going to pretend like it's not hard, but, like, this just shows, like, it can be done. It can be done really well, and it just is here, you know, and that's how they're able to have that level of tension in an event where you know the outcome if you're sitting there thinking in your rational mind, right? But, like, it draws you in with just the way that the story is told.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Totally agree. And I love the way you put that about, like, a good prequel makes you care about how it happens instead of what happens.
Right.
It's fantastic. Yeah. And I think this does this, right? Like, this episode is, like, as you were saying, a prime example of it. And, like, just the fact that we've been able, not only us, but, like, so many people have been able to talk so long and so much about 7 seconds of this episode, right?
Yeah.
It's canonically 7 seconds now. I don't care how long.
Right.
But, like, at a scene, right, that we're able to, like, go this in depth into analysis that, like, on the surface is, like, kind of a weirdly short lightsaber battle from what we're used to. Yeah.
And just on that further prequel thing, I think it does such a good job because not only does it contradict or take away from anything that's going to happen in A New Hope or the movies afterwards, but I also think it does a great job of bridging the gap between Clone Wars Kenobi and A New Hope Kenobi. And even the TV show, although we've had our thoughts about that. Because first of all, like, in the lightsaber duel itself, as we said, kind of like this is where Kenobi kind of shifts into Qui-Gon style, which he's then going to use against Vader in A New Hope. Right. But also just like we're seeing, again, the Tatooine aging kind of kicks in pretty darn quick because this is maybe 6-7 years after the TV show and like all the gray has kicked in.
But yeah.
Well, I think because Kenobi was 10 years after. Kenobi is 10 years after Revenge of the Sith, and this is like 7 years. This is like 2 years before the Battle of Yavin.
I think we're like in the year of the Battle of Yavin, aren't we? Aren't we like
close,
0 BBY?
There's definitely some vague amount of time before the Battle of Yavin that because of season 4 doesn't feel like it's that long, but like they have to establish a whole spoilers for season 4 and the end of season 3, I guess. But some stuff does happen. It's like it's a little hard to tell exactly how long all of that happening takes place. But I feel like this is like 7-8 years maybe, I think, right? After.
All this was just a tangent of the joke of Kenobi aging, but I still feel like he doesn't look quite as old as he looks by the time of A New Hope, but he certainly looks much older. He's acting that way, and without really getting into it, I think it answers another big question, which is why wasn't Kenobi getting more involved in the rebellion at this point? And I think it's in part, as he says, because he says he has to just stay here and look over Luke. In part because I think he doesn't trust himself, and in part because he does believe the rebellion has what it needs. Which I would question a bit, but I think it's to me it really filled in a big gap of like why is Kenobi doing what he's doing during this time.
You're right, it is 2 years BBY. I'm sorry, my bad. I think the rebellion has what it needs. I think is also, I don't know, maybe I'm projecting here, but like a knock on the Jedi almost. Like the rebellion doesn't need the Jedi, I think is kind of what he's saying in that sense, right? Like there's like the rebellion as it is right now has like Kanan, Ahsoka, and Ezra as far as like Jedi that we know about, right? And so like
or good side Force users, since Ahsoka's not Jedi.
Ahsoka's not like, I mean, and neither is like Kanan or Ezra really. I guess Kanan got knighted and stuff, but they're not like, none of them are technically Jedi anymore, right? But this like the rebellion has what it needed, I think is a slight like the hubris of the Jedi thinking that like they are what the universe needs all the time, and the idea of Obi-Wan just kind of like staying out of it for now. Right? Is his way of acknowledging that?
Yeah.
On the other hand, like, without Luke in A New Hope, like, all the rebels just die, right? Sure. They just get blown up by the Death Star because none of them can hit an exhaust port that's not much bigger than a womp rat or whatever. I don't know.
2 meters is a gigantic rodent. I
just
sort of like
it is. It's rodent of
that's a 7-foot
size.
rodent.
It's a fire swamp rodent.
Yeah.
Well, so that brings up actually. That brings up a question that I've been thinking about a lot, and this episode helped me think about it, but I've been thinking about it for a while. Let's say Luke doesn't go out into the desert and get attacked by the Tuskens.
Right.
Do you think Obi-Wan had a plan of, like, at this age or at this point in the rebellion or at this point, I'm going to go to Luke and say, hey, I need you to follow me on some damn idealistic crusade like your father? Did Obi-Wan just think he wasn't going to do that until like what do you think Obi-Wan's plan was if he hadn't just kind of stumbled into him?
I don't think Obi-Wan had a plan, right? I think his plan was watch over Luke, and like that was as far as the plan went, and he was just executing the plan. And then when Luke showed up to him, I think he probably thought of it as this like divine will of the Force, if you want to go there, right? And even through that, like he is just following Luke. Right? He's protecting Luke and doing his mission of watching over Luke.
Yeah, I agree that, like, I don't think he had much of a plan. I don't think it was a great lack of a plan either. Like, I would have a plan. I think having a plan would be a better idea. Here, the writers were looking out for him, so it was fine. Or the Force, if you want to call it that. It's up to how you want to view the story. But, like... Yeah, things just kind of worked out. But, like, Luke being the age Luke is when Luke starts the training in A New Hope is like, yeah, I mean, it's not the most logical way of the story. It's just, somebody read a lot of Joseph Campbell and, and that's the way those stories are written, and that's one of the challenges of, like, prequels is now you're like, oh, okay, how do I make all of this make all the sense? And I feel like here what they did with this was, like, they lampshaded it. They weren't like, okay, we're going to make everything make total sense. They're like, no, we're going to address it in a way that is kind of like telling you, the audience, like, look, yeah, we know, but, like, just here, how about this? How about this? And it's like, okay, sure.
They put a middle point in so that you can at least draw the line with headcanon in a way that might have been harder without this.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, like, it does make you wonder, like, let's say Luke actually does go to the academy. Is, like, Kenobi going to go get a job as a janitor in the academy? Like, what's he going to do then? But,
well, I think, like,
imagine that was the prequel series.
I think Owen especially, right, would have kept Obi-Wan from the academy. I don't think they're, like, explicitly saying, no, you're not going to go work for the space Nazis, but we need you here on the farm.
Right.
It's one more year, Luke. Like, let's just stay on the farm and not join the Imperials,
I
right?
never thought of it that way. That's a really good point.
I did see a Twitter comment also that pointed out something very important about the decision-making of the Lars, which is that, they are moisture farmers.
Yeah.
Aunt Beru, when she's cooking, there's all this steam just, like, floating up into the air. Like, that's not how you cook if you're collecting moisture at every possible opportunity. The Fremens are not happy with her.
There's no, like, hood collecting all that moisture.
Right. Yeah, that moisture's precious.
Yeah.
All right, anything else? There is a lot else that happens in this episode, but I think it's all just kind of leading up to this.
Oh, yeah.
I do think it's worth commenting on Ezra. There was a song that was really popular when I was in middle school called Once Bitten, Twice Shy, which I really want to play for, because, like, just the fact that, like, he falls into Maul's trap in exactly the same way again,
and like tells him it's a trap. Yeah.
And he's correct in that everyone thinks Kenobi is dead, and he's right that Kenobi's alive. But it's still like, dude, learn the lesson.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess Ezra is very headstrong, and so I get that he just is not able to yet, but it is kind of funny to me.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take the opposite viewpoint of, like, you're not wrong, but, like, you're wrong. Like 100% of the time, I'm going to go try and help someone who I think is, in need of help. And, like, if it's a trap, it's a trap, It's like, sure, okay, you trapped me, you got me, but, like, let's go, Like... I mean, maybe he wanted to face off against Maul again anyway, himself, But, like, yeah, if you think Kenobi might be alive and out there and need your help, like, okay,
that's
if
fair.
it's a trap, it's a trap. I'll deal with it then.
I mean, and that is, when Anakin says to Kenobi, this is a trap, what do we do? And Kenobi says, we spring the trap.
Right,
so,
exactly.
He's following some good footsteps there.
Yeah.
Does anyone know why the holocrons were, like, a fifth size of what they normally were?
I think they got broken, right, in that episode way back.
Oh, okay. So these are kind of like mini holocrons.
Yeah.
They're like kind
They're
of
like pieces.
parts of the Triforce.
They're like the little pyramid chunks that broke off. Yeah.
I was a little confused at first too, but then there were like a whole bunch of little pieces in Kanan's bunk, right? And then Ezra just,
missed that. Okay,
of them or something, I think.
That would make sense.
Yeah, I also liked the nod. Like, I think we talked about it a little bit already, but the nods to A New Hope, specifically the R2-3PO in the desert scene with Chopper and Ezra in the desert, but like Ezra takes on the R2 role and Chopper takes on the 3PO.
Takes on the 3PO role, yeah.
Which is just like fantastic, right? Because that's not normally how that dynamic goes. And I thought it was like a loving nod to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, without being like an overwhelming reference, right?
Yeah,
it's just
totally.
a little,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was nicely done.
Absolutely.
I'm sad we didn't get a hello there, but can't have everything.
No hello there. I wanted to just circle back to the point that you made, Sarah, about so when Uncle Owen like doesn't want to send Luke to the academy, you like that when you say it, it feels like, oh, yeah, of course. Like, why would he want him to go to the academy? You know, because it's the Imperial Academy, right? Like, Luke wants to go to the Imperial Academy, even though he wants to be a rebel. And I guess that's just how you learn to fly. I mean, although apparently it doesn't take that much training.
Like, his friends have all gone. Like, Wedge went to the Imperial Academy, right? And, like, now Wedge is before the Rebels.
Biggs,
but, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and Wedge in Rebels. But the Biggs, he's talking about Biggs, right? And then,
sure, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
But he's friends with Wedge, isn't he? Or does he become friends with Wedge? I think
later.
so.
I think.
Oh man, I need to rewatch.
Yeah, we'd actually even comment that Wedge was the one who went with the droids on that mission.
We mentioned his name at the very beginning.
Yeah.
We read his name. We didn't discuss it.
But Biggs is like Luke's childhood friend, right? Who then goes off to join the academy.
Yeah.
And
I think it's definitely true that Owen and Beru wouldn't want him going off to work for the Empire. But I also think like that if someone said like, "Hey, Luke, we want to take Luke away to help him like learn to fly X-wings and fight the Empire," that like I don't think that's what they want either. They just want to like have everyone like keep their heads down, let the fighting happen, not get involved.
True, but I mean as we saw in Kenobi, right? Like Ben and Beru have Owen. Uncle Ben. I'm thinking Spider-Man.
Yeah. I always want to do that.
Do you? Let's go. Okay, I'm glad I'm not alone. Owen and Beru probably don't have a lot of sympathy for the Imperials, right? Like Tatooine's kind of managed to stay on the edge of things, but like I feel like they are less inclined to have Luke go to the Imperials, but also don't want to get into the baggage of explaining to him why he shouldn't be going to the Imperial Academy.
Yeah.
So it's just like, no, we need you on the farm.
Right.
Like, just stay on the farm. We need you on the farm.
That makes a lot of sense.
And I will say, I'm not 100% clear that it is the Imperial Academy he means when he says the Academy.
Okay.
Because like I know in Legends canon, they had this idea that there was enough of a rebellion already that there was an academy like for training people in that. That hasn't really shown up in canon. But I don't think it's ever been clearly established what, like, it's a huge galaxy. I'm guessing there's lots of academies to go to. But yes, it is, I mean, we do find out big, I think it is more than likely that it's the Imperial Academy, but I'm not 100% sure. Mm-hmm. And certainly if there is some, like, obscure thing in a comic that's canon now, or Disney canon now, listeners, please write in and let me know. Let us know.
Wild. In my mind, it's like, he explicitly says Imperial Academy, but like,
oh no,
I don't think he actually does.
Yeah, no.
Just join the Academy. Yeah, and wow, this is like my Mandela effect moment where like,
the Luke, I am your father moment, even though that is never said. Right.
So I never thought it was like Luke, I am your father. I always thought it was no, I am your father. So, but I guess like I just came to Star Wars. Late enough that it was already a like, oh, you were misremembering this.
Yeah.
So but yeah, I like the idea that there are like many academies. Like maybe Luke wants to go join like the Chicago Art Academy or something like that. That'd be fantastic.
I mean, doing a bit more research now, every search I find says he was going to go off to the Imperial Academy.
Yeah,
so,
but like it says
probably the case.
Luke voiced his wish to join the Academy someday in A New Hope. It wasn't immediately clear which academy he was referring to.
Yeah.
According to Screen Rant.
Think, when you have an empire, often you end up with one academy, right? That's like the thing about empires.
Yeah.
They don't like competition for anything.
Except, I mean, no, because, I mean, we know canonically, like, the academy that Wedge was at was not, like, the academy. There was, like, a lot of... They talk about it as being, like, a local academy, and that, like, they're in kind of competition with some of the the academies out there.
You mean
but
Biggs?
It's like a branch, right? I mean, sort of like one state school amongst, like, a bunch of state schools, kind of?
Yeah, exactly.
Like Binghamton versus... Stony
Hold
Brook.
on, I'm confused. Wedge was at the Imperial Academy, right?
Yeah.
Right. He was at one of the many...
Yeah.
He was at a Imperial Academy, not the Imperial Academy. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, the idea being that there were multiple locations, at least, within some large system, but that, there is some, school spirit or something. I don't know.
That totally makes sense. Like, you wouldn't
Yeah.
just have to, everybody, like, goes to Coruscant to go to the academy. That
Right.
makes sense.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's probably tens of thousands of TIE fighters out there and
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
just as many pilots.
Sure,
So
sure.
Well,
Totally makes
they
sense.
need like twice as many pilots. Or
It's like,
maybe
it
not.
reminds
I
me
guess
of,
you
like,
lose the plane when you lose the pilot most of the time.
Definitely. Yeah. It has, like, when people talk about California State University vibes, like, I go to a California State
Right.
University. I teach at a California State University. It's like, there's, like, 56 of them. You have
Right,
to
right,
be more
right.
specific.
Like Cal
Yeah.
Berkeley and Cal Santa Cruz aren't like the same, right?
No, and just, like, in LA, there's, like,
Yeah.
12 at least.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
yeah, exactly.
yeah, and the Cal system is totally different from the Cal State system. Like it's just
Or no, like, so Cal State is one thing, and then there's University of California, which is
Right.
a different thing, and there's
Okay.
also a whole bunch
Right.
of those. Yeah, it's
yeah.
wild and wacky.
All right, well, I think we're deep into tangent land. So
What?
does
No.
anyone kind of make some last comments about this episode or these two episodes together?
I have
wanted
a
to make-
question. Oh, but go ahead.
Go for it.
Oh,
Okay, my comment was just the whole, like, Qui-Gon Jinn fighting stance, Obi-Wan situation, and how, like, I think it's... I missed it before, but it's, like, really interesting that Obi-Wan is using Qui-Gon's stance against Vader, Anakin
yeah.
in their battle in A New Hope, because, like, Qui-Gon was the mentor. Like, Qui-Gon was what Anakin needed, so he's, like, giving him Qui-Gon at the end. Anyway, that was
Interesting.
my little...
Yeah. It doesn't work quite as well against Vader as it does against Maul.
Yeah.
Just, you know. My question was going to be, do you feel like both of you watched this episode a while back, right? And then
I mean, I watched it an hour ago, but
yeah, no, that's okay.
But
So-
that's not the first time you saw
Oh, yes,
it.
accurate.
Right.
True. Yes,
yeah, both
yes,
of you watched this a while ago, right? Then watched the Kenobi show, and then watched this episode again more recently.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like the Kenobi show, and this is maybe a loaded question, we don't have to get too deep into the Obi-Wan Kenobi show rabbit hole, but do you feel like having watched that show sort of affected in any way kind of your viewing this time? Like, did it feel different, or did it feel kind of the same?
Well, I have goldfish brain, so I don't entirely
Okay.
remember what I thought the first time, which makes watching movies a wonderful experience for me every time. But I do feel like watching it this time, I had a lot more empathy for Obi-Wan, right? Because Kenobi was, like, fresh on my mind,
Yeah.
and this idea of, like, what he's experienced out in this desert, and this idea, like, the line of, like, it's time to heal this wound definitely stood out to me
Yeah.
as, like, Obi-Wan's got a lot of wounds he needs
Right.
to heal, and I'm happy
Right.
for him that he gets to heal this one.
Yeah.
And I don't think I would have had that reading on it at the first pass.
Okay. Cool.
I think for me it's mostly the same. Like as I said when we talked about Kenobi, like there's a lot that I really liked about that show, but in a lot of ways I felt like it didn't line up with New Hope in ways that I just, it's not that if it doesn't matter to you, that's fantastic. It just, for whatever reason, it just didn't sit right with me. There was less of that with this. I think though that when I saw this the first time, I had a real like moment of like, oh God, this is the first time we have seen Kenobi since his battle against Anakin.
Yeah.
And also the first time Kenobi has had to do this, you know, and to me that whole kind of like coming out of retirement to deal with Maul, especially with Luke being so close and, you know, New Hope happening within a couple of years, if not less, that's a big part of how this scene affected me. And I think having watched Kenobi didn't take away from it. Like, it wasn't like it was less impactful,
Yeah.
but had to kind of be like, I'm just going to ignore Kenobi and enjoy this.
Interesting.
Especially because the other thing was, and again, it's kind of one of the sour notes about Kenobi was, Kenobi makes it seem like for the first 10 years, he's been hiding on Tatooine, telling himself that he's watching over Luke, which is important, but also because he's not ready to deal with what happened with Anakin, and he's not ready, and he doesn't trust himself to get involved again. And the way Kenobi ends makes it feel like Kenobi should now be more active in the time between the TV show and A New Hope, which this shows he hasn't been.
Right.
So, and again, it's like it's a small thing from Kenobi, and it's pretty easy for me to ignore. But I do think, it wasn't even as much as like that it took away anything from this episode as much as watching this episode was one more of like, oh yeah, Kenobi doesn't really fit with this. Okay, that's fine. I can just ignore Kenobi.
So the I get a different take from like the ending of Kenobi, I guess, which is like, and I think this is like something you said was at the beginning of Kenobi, Obi-Wan thinks he's watching over Luke, but he's just lying to himself and hiding. I think at the end of Kenobi, Obi-Wan is watching over Luke, right? Like he's actually doing the thing that he set out to do, and he's not lying to himself and hiding anymore, but he's still like on Tatooine and there with purpose, and the purpose is to actually like look and care for Luke, not to just like feel sorry for himself. I don't know. What about you, Paul? You also did the bookends between Kenobi. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I feel like it didn't affect it that much for me, you know, which is both sort of, I mean, I wouldn't call it a knock on the show, but just, you know, I feel like the show did definitely take the character on a journey, you know, but that journey maybe didn't do a whole lot for me in my where I'm thinking of the character being at different points within the show, you know.
Yeah, I think it's fair.
I do think it works, you know. It doesn't, nothing about it really bothers me in terms of like, oh, but wait, this and that, and you know, the whole like Obi-Wan not wanting to get involved in the rebellion, like, I wasn't sold on it before. I'm not sold on it now. You're super powerful, dude. Go do something, you know. But okay, you know, it's like that's what he decided he's gonna do, and that's what the story needs him to do. So fine, you know. And here they talk about Bale saying that he died, right? And so that doesn't feel inconsistent with like people generally not really knowing that he's around and everything.
Right.
It would all be more consistent if you didn't have, you know, Kanan and Ezra and Ahsoka running around with the rebellion, which, you know, that's just the sort of like, all right, I mean, the show was great, you know, and it does a really good job of handling those characters, and the show is better for having all those characters in it, right? But also it's like, I don't know. I mean, I feel like everything that happens before A New Hope and everything that happens from A New Hope on, kind of you have to sort of, for me, I need to kind of just make a little mental divide that's like, okay, all these things before, when I'm watching the original trilogy, I'm not thinking about any of the stuff that happened before it. You know, I'm just thinking about those movies within their own context. And when I think about the original, you know, the original, the prequel stuff, like everything that happens before that, I kind of think of it as all this one coherent thing that you can think of in the context of all this other stuff's going to happen. But, you know, it can be kind of a little bit of a soft canon more to me, you know, where it's just like, I like to think of these more as different stories told within the same basic universe that don't have to have perfect continuity, but like hopefully don't have really abrasively disruptive discontinuity, you know? And I feel like they all work that way to some extent, as long as you're like, time, travel, you know, these things.
Aging,
A Jedi needs not.
I mean, I think the way you can think of it is like, you know, with Batman the Animated Series, which leads into the same continuity of Justice League. There's a bunch of like one-off movies that were made with some of the same cast and some of the same things, and like they don't all they very much feel like they are of those same characters, and like often it's the same voice actors and the same artists, but also just it feels accurate to the tone. But it's not really clear how they fit into the canon, or sometimes they might contradict things a little bit, and that's okay, you know. Exactly. And I think that's kind of how I would see it now. It's like, to me, the show Kenobi gave me a really interesting like character exercise about Kenobi that teaches me some good things about him. It introduced me to the character of Reva, who I love and I really want to see more of. It let me, I feel like if there's any character for whom the show of Kenobi to me is 100% hard canon, it's Leia. Like, she's the one who I really feel like we got the most story of. How Kenobi's story fits to this other stuff, I don't really feel it, but I don't need to. Like I said, Paulie, I think we can just sort of like, cool. That tells me about Kenobi. That's how it matches up. I don't really need to figure that out.
Yeah,
cool.
I liked what you said, Paul, about like not needing perfect canon, just not needing like glaringly abrasive non-canon. And because like it also like, and like what you were saying, Matthew, comics get to get away with this all the time, right? They're constantly retconning and like doing stuff that contradicts other stuff. And like beyond comics, right? Like Greek mythology is constantly doing this. Like this has been a staple in human storytelling since we've been telling stories, right? And so like to expect perfect canon out of Star Wars is maybe asking a little much. And if we like acknowledge it and let it go, then it's not gonna make us as angry. It's something like I need to tell this to myself too.
Yeah. I will also say on superhero ethics, Paul and I recently put up an episode specifically about canon. Really, it was much more about continuity and like what we think of as continuity and what isn't. But these are all topics we got into, so I'd strongly recommend people check that out.
Yeah, check that out.
All right, well, thank you both so much for being a part of this. I want to give you a chance to kind of sing the praises of what you all are up to. Sarah, how goes the art and creativeness and making money from the creativeness?
Oh, it goes. I'm teaching. I'm a ceramics professor now.
Nice.
Still doing my MFA, but teaching, and it's great. It's going awesome. It has meant that a lot of my online business has just moved from the back burner to like a shelf somewhere. I'm selling things in person. If you're in the LA area and you follow me on Instagram, if you follow my stories, you'll see some craft fairs that I'm in. But otherwise, I don't have the bandwidth for shipping stuff out. I might open up a shop closer to Christmas. The best way to keep an eye on what I'm doing is to check out my Instagram page, which is Sarah Hayashi Art, at Sarah Hayashi Art on Instagram. So, yeah.
Cool. And Mr. Zen Madman, what madness have you found in Zen?
Yeah, that's not really how I conceptualize my name, but I thought that was a delightful turn of phrase.
Happy to help.
I'm Zen Madman on Twitter and Twitch, and I've been tweeting a lot more recently, mostly chess positions and about playing poker in the shower, which I don't recommend, but it worked out really well. So, they make these phones kind of waterproof now, right? And
just put a plastic bag over it.
Mine seem to like break without doing anything to them, just by putting it next to my ear, so whatever. We've been streaming most Wednesdays at, I believe the time we're going with is 5:30 p.m. Pacific time, right? That's our current thing. And then I do some poker in the mornings at like 11 Pacific on certain days, probably Tuesdays and Fridays, but it's all still a little bit up in the air. But if you want to see what I'm up to, you can check out those spots, and also various Zen Madmans on YouTube.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for being a part of this. And as always, we want to know what you think. We love the feedback. I've got some feedback we're going to discuss in an upcoming episode. We've been getting great people writing in, so thank you so much for that. Keep it up. If you go to theethicalpanda.com, that's kind of my nom de plume on the internet. Nom de internet. It is theethicalpanda.com. There you'll find Facebook, Twitter, all the ways to contact us, our TikTok account. Most importantly, though, so please write in your feedback, send us thoughts, send us comments. And of course, there you can also find all the other podcasts I'm a part of, especially Superhero Ethics. Please tune into this podcast continuously. We're going to be ramping up towards a new Andor show that's going to be coming out in mid-September. And friends, I really want to get more people listening to it because, it helps the podcast, it helps bring in a little bit of revenue to help pay the bills around here. But also, I want more people in these conversations. I love getting to throw these questions out and hear what you all have to think. So if you don't mind, like if you're enjoying this podcast, pick a friend and talk to them about it. Maybe go to iTunes or wherever you watch podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. Or if you don't want a 5-star, leave us whatever review. But hopefully if you're sticking around, you're at least somewhat fond of us. We might have some hate listens. That's fine too. But give us a review. Tell a friend about it. Drop some other ways because it's just such an important time, I think, right now to build up these voices together. So on behalf of myself, Paul, Sarah, thank you all so much for listening and have a great day.